So when did Mantova's open?
Oh, wow. The store was started in 1978. I can't listen to myself that deeply. You're okay with it.
No, I'll take them off. Some people can't do the headphones.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
It's just hearing your own voice.
My own voice
people
doubled.
out.
It's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much of me. No, the store started in 1978. It actually started not as 2 Street Music, but it started as, I think it was Humboldt 101. A lot of the old timers that were back then always tell me little stories about how it really started. There was kind of a changeover that went on. Russ and Mike bought it. They bought out the inventories of a couple of stores. Like for a while, Russ was set up. I think he started in 1976. And I think he started either up the street on 2nd or on 3rd Street and called it something different. Bottom line is the 2 years that he had that other spot, it was a single room music store and the back wall was movable. So if they had a lot of stuff, they could push the wall back. If they didn't have much stuff, bring the wall up so it looked nice and full. 78, then it moved to the location that it is now. And so it's had 3 different groups of owners. My brothers and I, we bought it 15 years ago in 2009. And Kip bought it from Russ in the 90s. I forget exactly when. It probably would have been like 1999, 98, because Kip had it for 10 years. And then we're the 3rd group of owners.
Wow. And always a music store.
It's all, well, since 78, that building's been a music store. If you look at the old Eureka maps that were showing what the old town looked like in the year 1900, there's all these old buildings, many of which are torn down, of course, and some factories. But where 2 Street Music is an empty lot. It's a grass lot. Like they were probably running chickens there. The actual building itself, I don't think was built until 1915. And at that point, from that point to 78, it had been a bunch of things. It had been a hardware store. It was a place to hold rendezvous vending, all of those vending machines. It held that. There was actually a skating rink on the 2nd floor, which is pretty cool. I learned about that only a few years ago. That was kind of a surprise, right? So it's been a lot of different things. What it is now, and even at one point, the music store actually had a 2nd floor. But at this point, the staircase has been blocked off, can't go up there. And it's a major bummer. I'd love to have the 2nd story, right? There's so many things I want that I can't get in that location, but it's the perfect location for us for so many reasons. So yeah, the building's been a lot. It's incredibly haunted. I don't know if you do the paranormal on Growing Pains. I don't know, but incredibly haunted. A lot of the same kind of sightings over the years. So that's always an avenue we can go down. And at first, I didn't really believe in that stuff. But the moment you get that 10th, 12th, 13th person that says, hey, what with that lady in the, was she wearing a pink dress? Yeah. You know, there's just like 4 or 5 characters that it's incredibly haunted, but nothing bad happens. It's just an incredible place to work.
Has anybody been killed there?
I don't know.
What's the story behind the ghosts?
Well, they're interesting. There's a bald guy in one of the rooms who, until recently, has always been there. He hasn't been there in the last year or so. The pink lady is the one that gets the most attention. She carries an umbrella, and I actually have it. I can get it to you. I have a picture of her. One of my guys felt her presence, turned around, took her picture. So I actually do have a picture of this thing, which is kind of cool. But she's been there forever, since the beginning of the last 15 years. She has been there. And then there's we have a bin system. We have racks and racks of bins that are numbered. So we sell a lot of small parts online. If something sells online, we know exactly where to get it. And that would be a really good thing if nobody messed around with it. Things will come out of the bins and get thrown across the room. I know it's hard to believe, but it does happen.
Do you have it on camera? Do you have security in there?
We don't have a camera on that spot. We've never seen that. Now, I do have footage from when we had the strings in a different area of the store. This is like 10 years ago. Mr. Garrett saw an apparition. Yeah, he saw it walk in front of the string wall, and none of us saw it. But we ran the tape back, and sure enough, the moment that he said it happened, the strings were swaying.
Is this happening in daylight?
It happens in broad daylight. It happens in broad daylight. It actually does. I know it's crazy. I know we weren't going to open with this, but this is what Growing Pains happens.
The beauty of the podcast.
It sneaks up on you. You can't prepare for this. Yeah, incredibly haunted, but not in a bad way. I never get the bad vibes from it. Yeah.
Nothing nefarious.
Nothing nefarious.
Nobody feels in danger.
Never, ever.
Wow.
No.
It's
a weird feeling.
Frequent?
All the time.
Really?
Especially this time of year. It's been ramping up more. There will be months where it's really quiet, but then this time of year, yeah, it's very, very active. Yeah. And in the first few years, I didn't want to talk about it because it's weird. I thought it would hurt business. I find the more I talk about it, people dig it. they want to learn more about it. So
it's almost a little spin-off you could
It's
make.
a little spin-off.
Yeah.
We had a ghost
Come visit
hunt,
the haunted music store.
Exactly right. We had a ghost hunt there one time. Jay Miles on his podcast back when he was doing that. Him and his brother came with a bunch of gear, and they did EMF readings and all this stuff. And results may vary. I don't think we busted anything that night, but it was kind of fun to put out the ghost equipment and try to see if there's anything lurking around.
Wow.
I
Is
think
that up on their page?
It was at one point. I don't know. It's probably there somewhere. This was from a few years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? I didn't see that coming.
No, I know. It's I just throw it out there if there's any interest.
Yeah.
I think the positivity of music, I think all the good vibes, all the energy, good, bad, and whatever that comes through that place. We have so much going on. I think it pushes it away. I don't think it's got time. I think the bad things need space to brood, right? To hang out.
Negative energy.
Yeah, we don't really have that. At least I don't think we do. So we try to keep it moving, No,
it makes sense. You guys have a great spot down there. I mean, a beautiful setup.
It's been great for what we need. Hope in a lot of ways. The things I like to have is I like to have a parking lot. There's some store owners I know who do like parking lot parties. They do a promo that would do really well up here. It does well in the Bay Area, is the store will basically say, here's our parking lot. You can have a table here, kind of like they do at the flea market. Do things like that. I would love to do stuff like that. I can't do it with my location. So there's a few things that I come up against that kind of hold us back. The future of the store really should be education. And fact of the matter is, we've got lesson rooms. We keep them filled pretty well. We could do a little bit better on that. But our location's a rough one. And so you do, unfortunately, get a lot of parents that don't feel safe dropping their kids off in the wild west of Old Town.
Is that just with the homeless issue down there?
With the homeless issue. That's a huge problem. It's why I got involved again. I wasn't going to get back into politics, but I had to get involved because I thought it was going to get even worse. We've been through some tough stuff down there, really tough stuff. And it holds the store back because we could have an incredible education set up if we didn't have the homeless pandemic that we have. I mean, we really could. It's one of the few things that really holds us back, and it's incredibly frustrating.
Well, especially as a small business owner down there, dealing with it day in and day out.
Now, the stores that make it on just education alone, a lot of them went out of business during COVID because they were all service-based. We did it the hard way. We're retail, so we are just stacks and stacks of inventory. And so when COVID came, we got through it because we had supply. But if we had been a lessons-based store, retail second, it would have been a serious problem. So we got really lucky that we do things the hard way. But I like to have life a little bit easier. And if I could just bring in another 10 teachers and then all of the lesson income that comes from that and all of the positive energy that comes from that, it'd be unstoppable. But because we're kind of restricted on that, and I'm totally fine with this, it is what it is, but because we're restricted on that, we have a lot of studios that are opening up and offering lessons. Eureka Music School is a really good one. Aaron Souza's space in Fortuna, Mark DeLeo in Fortuna, and then there's a bunch of others. They're all stepping up to the plate and taking care of that critical need. I would just like to be more part of it, but it is what it is.
Well, it's got to be hard to maintain a competitive edge in that space because the information is so decentralized now. You could just YouTube videos. It's not quite the same as being in person and having someone be able to correct your form. I'm thinking if you're playing a guitar or something, but you can still kind of get the gist.
Entry level has to be in person. The Zoom thing only worked because of COVID.
I didn't even think of Zoom.
Yeah, if you're paying $25 to $40 a lesson for beginning, you got so much form stuff that has to be corrected. You can't do that over Zoom. And I mean, of course you can do it. You can pay somebody to do it, but the education is not going to be as good because you need that teacher to say, hey, that hand is.
Yeah, if you build a foundation of bad technique.
Yeah, and that's what happens.
And just compound on that.
Exactly. And that's part of it. It's like, I like to be more accessible to people for lessons, but part of that is not just having the space, it's also finding the talent. And there's a lot of people that teach here, and several of them I've signed up. A lot of them I've pushed away. And then still more are kind of on the waiting list. Because what I will never do is I'll never have my teachers be at like 30% capacity and then add another 5 people. Because that's terrible. And that's what a lot of stores do. There's got to be that kind of quality control. But it's a balance. You don't want to go so far on that you only have 1 or 2 teachers and then you're pushing everybody away. But then again, you also have to do quality control of the methodology. If you've got teachers that can't teach how to read, are not teaching good technique, then you look bad if you bring them in. And
Yeah,
so,
that branding is going to fall on you guys.
Exactly. But we have many rules. One of our rules is the house is neutral. Well, okay, we're not really neutral when we're picking the teachers, though. They have to have some criteria. They have to fill some space. So it's just balance. It's growing pains.
Subtle plug there.
Yeah.
You guys had a phenomenal guitar teacher back in the day, and I'm not sure if he's still there. I can't think of his name.
Dave Wilson, back in the day.
He was a finger picking
Angel
guy.
Fargus is still there.
That might have been him.
Angel's still there.
Really?
Yeah, he's almost been there the whole 15 years. I think we brought him on like maybe 2 or 3 years in.
I took one lesson from him maybe a decade ago.
Okay.
Or close to. It was around the time I was in high school. It might have been my senior year. And then I got sucked into work, so I never went back. But he was great. Great teacher. Really interesting guy, too.
He's very interesting. Obviously, he would do this in a heartbeat. Nobody promotes better than Angel Fargus. He would be really interesting because everyone knows him for his music, but he has such a varied life. There's so much going on there. He's known, he carved 2 wooden thrones for the Queen of Malaysia. Nobody knows this, but he did it. He carved 2 thrones. He's one of those chainsaw guys. He can make a bear out of a stump, and it actually looks like a bear.
Was he contracted out by her, or did he send those to her, or this is just something he did?
He's told me that story a couple of times. You got to bring him on here.
I might have to, yeah.
That it interests you. But also the whole Contra Sandinista nonsense that was going on down there, he was involved in that. He, I think I'm getting this right. I hope I am. He was actually tortured for a day by the Sandinistas, I believe it was, and he managed to escape. That's a whole story that he's got to tell you. I don't want to misspeak it because it's been a while, but the guy's had an incredible life in addition to being a credible guitarist, but he'd be great on here. I'd listen to that. And that's why I like your show, because I don't have the time to sit down and grill a person for 3 hours. I can't do it. I'm busy, but you do it. So I'm in my car. I just turn on Nick and I get to know these people without doing the work. It's magnificent, you know?
Yeah, well, and it's fun for me being in here.
Thanks for doing
getting
that.
to talk to him. Yeah. Well, that's kind of how you came on my radar, was you had suggested a few guests.
Oh, okay.
And I picked up on
I wondered
one.
if that was what it was.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I need him to do the work on whoever it was I sent you. Carl was fantastic.
Carl was in here, absolutely.
Carl didn't hold back. There were some things he told you that was like, dang, you went there. But it's important because Carl did the, struggle with the trans thing, and he came out on the other end of it and learned a ton of lessons. So it's like, in this age we're living in, that's one of the most serious subjects people are talking about. What better person to talk to? Because he's got a perspective you're not going to find anywhere else, regardless of what your opinion is. I love people like that. And that's part of how I get my information. I don't know how you do it, but to me, the legacy media, it's over. The dream is over. MSNBC, Fox News, CNN.
Especially after, did you follow that story recently of the freed prisoner?
The torturer in chief, right? He was the lead torture guy.
Under Assad.
That's atrocious.
Oh, man.
But they've got so many embarrassments, so many. And I think James O'Keefe said it best, right? He said, when you cite anonymous sources, when you cite sources that you're not going to put their names out, you can do that. But every time you cite that source that only you know and nobody else knows, you're pulling out of your bank of integrity. And it's okay to do that if there's something in the bank. The problem is overdrawn. They are so overdrawn, it's ridiculous. I could list a whole bunch of different things they've told us that are flat out not true for decades. So anyway, a little tangent there. But where I get my information now is probably about 40%, 20 to 40% human intelligence, 20, 40% my own reading, and then 20% social media. And I'm blending it together, putting it on the shelf. Some of it, a lot of it, I just kind of like, I'll look at that later. I don't know about that.
Bookmark it, put it to the side.
And I think that's how we're all trying to do it, because I don't think anybody knows really what's going on. They might in like a professional capacity if they were there, kind of a thing. And
how many people are there? You
got to find them. And that's why I keep the conversation so open-ended at the store. I've gotten some bombshells of information. Don't know if it's all true, but I've gotten these bombshells that you're not going to get anywhere else. And I've learned a lot. I had a guy that turned down a job to work at the base in Antarctica. Apparently, we have an underground city there. I had no idea. But then I took some of the information he gave me. I collaborated it, not on Google, but on like a Brave browser. And I'm like, oh, shit, that's a thing. That's a thing, So that was interesting. Another guy was telling me about this tiny micronation that's by Madagascar, and they have a pretty sweet thing there. If you're basically like wanting to start your life over and you don't want the government to come after you, you pay, he said he was a military contractor that worked there, you pay $500,000, but you get citizenship and nobody can take you away. Who learns about this stuff? Where is this information? Well, it's from people like that. And I've gotten a ton of Bigfoot stories that way. And the way I do Bigfoot, I've had so many Bigfoot stories, especially with Native Americans, people that live out in Gasky, places like that. All you do is you don't ask it the wrong way. You just say, the last time you saw Bigfoot, what did he do? And you'll be shocked. They'll just talk.
There's a local.
Now I have no idea if it's true.
There's a local Bigfoot guy.
It's interesting.
Who had a TV show or something back in the day. I've been trying to. We've got something in the works. I'm trying to bring him on to talk about that.
I believe.
Do you?
I do actually. I can't.
Do you believe in Gigantopithecus, or do you believe in a current version of Bigfoot today?
Now here you might have to educate me, because my belief comes from not only what I've read, but from the old papers, from the old newspapers, from the frontiersmen from the early turn of the century, 1910, 1915, 1905, fur trappers, people that were going out in the field and were having their campgrounds messed up or having their meat taken away, or, people that they called them the wild man back then. It was called the wild man in the papers. I'm more willing to believe that because it also jives with a lot of the Native American stories of the time. And it jives. So you can't just ignore that. You can't ignore the stories. How they keep it quiet. I mean, if Bigfoot gets hit by a car, does the military come out and clean it up? I've heard that. I don't know. But I find it really interesting. And the only way you get that information is to talk to people.
Well, Gigantopithecus was a real animal.
You see that? I don't know. When you said that, I don't know what that is.
It was a bipedal hominid. And I believe the reason that they were able to prove it existed is there was someone, I believe, in China that had a skull and they took it to some pawn shop or something. And then scientists came in and they realized, oh, this was actually a species that existed at some point in time, which corroborates the idea that, the Native Americans had all these stories of a bipedal hominid that was huge.
Yeah.
But the question is, are they alive today? Were they hunted to extinction? Did it just kind of fade? There's also a condition that people have where they get extremely hairy and have hair all over their face. So did you just have some 6-foot guy in the pioneer days that was struggling with that and living out in the sticks?
I have no way to do the research, but just talk to people that live out there. And I've talked to other people that type of people that'll just go out in the forest with nothing but a knife, and just to camp, right? And they say, no way in hell is that real. It's like, okay, maybe. But yeah, I haven't dug into it any more than that. The best story I had to do with somebody that had a VW bug or a VW bus. It was a bus. And Bigfoot just wasn't having it. They parked for the night on the hill. I can't remember. I don't think they wanted to stay there, but they had to for some reason. And Bigfoot wasn't having it. So he just grabbed the front of the car and just moved it up and down. Big hairy guy moving it up and down.
They were in the car while this happened?
They were in the car when it happened, yeah. And they were terrified. They looked out the window, started the car up, drove away. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you ask it the wrong way, though, right? If you say, is he real? Like if you live in Willow Creek or whatever. If you ask it that way, they won't talk to you. You got to sneak up on the question.
We've got to be careful because so many people want to believe.
I know. And I try not to
diehards.
You're absolutely right. I try not to fall in that category. I really try because you can psychosomatically, you can make anything happen. And I really try not to do that. I've never seen a ghost at the store, by the way.
Oh, you've never seen one?
I have never seen a ghost. I got to be clear about that. This is where I get my information. I get it from people. People come to me and they say what they see, and then I take it and file it away. And I don't believe the first time. I believe it the third, the fourth, and the fifth.
But you got to be in that store more than anybody, though.
I am. Yeah.
And you've never seen one?
Never. No, I've only actually seen, we might get into this too. I've only seen an actual ghost once in my life, and it was tied to a whole nother situation, which is crazy and happened a few years ago. But in the store, I've never seen one. There might have been one time where I might have saw a frame of something, but it's not enough for me to get on the radio and say, oh, I saw this. No, it's not
definitively.
Like that. I can't do that, yeah. There was only one time definitively. My girlfriend and I, a few years ago, I can't believe I'm doing this, we busted up a prescription drug selling ring. We lived in the duplex here in Eureka, and everyone has moved out of that house. So please don't Google it. But our neighbors in this duplex, nasty woman. She worked for the hospital. And at this point, the hospital had fired 2 night nurses for stealing prescription drugs. Well, there's a third one. It was her. And so what she did was, we have everything. We got it on video. We got video of her with the pill bottle, counting the pills out, the super nice cars coming at all times of the day and night, counting out the cash. We've got it, right? We took what we had. We let the sheriffs know. The sheriffs they're not going to do anything. They're busy. But we went to the hospital. And the reason we put all this work in, what led up to all this, we normally live well and leave people alone. But what happened was our neighbors were truly awful, and they would scream at night. They'd fight, and they'd have domestic disturbances like 1 a.m. And one time too many. The man yelled something about hating his life, and then he ran out in the back. We were right by a forest. We were buttressed up to a forest. He ran right behind our house and kept yelling and raving. Well, I'm trying to sleep. It's 1 a.m. It's not a college area. You know what I mean? We're in the woods. We pay too much in rent. We just, come on. And we've already talked 2 or 3 times. Please don't fight loudly at 1 a.m.
Keep it down.
Just keep it down, right? We really are easygoing. But then what finally happened was we were a little bit pissed. Might have said some things we shouldn't have, but we stepped outside. We said, guys, you got to stop. You can't do this. The next morning, her truck tires were slashed. My girlfriend's tires got slashed. And what happened at that point was, wow. Up until that point, we had some suspicions, but we didn't know that it was a prescription drug ring. We didn't know all the criminal activity. We had no idea, honestly. So then we put up some cameras. We had to, put up some cameras, and that really made them upset over there. And that's when we started getting the footage. I hate to think of what was going on before we had the cameras, but we got the cameras of all this evidence. Over 500 pieces of recorded interesting stuff we have on a file. But the money shot is the pills, the pill bottle, the cash. I mean, we've got that. We took what we had, and we gave it to the hospital. I won't say which one, right? We gave it to the hospital, and then she was terminated shortly thereafter. But I think we did a good thing, because I wonder how many lives we saved. Because it's one thing to think about, oh, wow, prescription drugs, there's a market for that. People need it. They might not all be able to get to the hospital. Maybe there's some weird argument you can make, but I'm sorry. She wasn't buying those drugs. She was stealing those drugs. So it's like, I wonder how many people suffered because she was taking their pills. It's crazy.
Well, and how many people did she get hooked on those? I mean,
God only knows. But we stopped it. We stomped it out. The reason I'm going into this is part of figuring out what was going on was monitoring her social media. Well, she's a witch. She's a friggin' witch, like a real one. And so who knows what she was doing over there, but I think she opened a portal, because what ended up happening is my girlfriend and I, like 6 months after she had left and been evicted, she was thrown out. We were sitting on the couch in our living room, and she played something on her TikTok. Now, I don't have TikTok on my phone. I'm just not about it for several reasons, right? But she played it on her phone, and it had to do with, it was a little nursery rhyme, an old nursery rhyme about time, okay? And that's important, as you'll find out here in a second. She on TikTok, you play it once, you giggle, you play it again. She played it the second time, and I swear this is true. What happened was she played it the second time on the couch, and our clock that was on the mantle levitated and then moved 8 feet in a downward diagonal, 8 feet, and slammed on the floor and cracked, and glass went everywhere. And it was because it happened right after she played that thing on her TikTok. And so there had been some other weird stuff too, but that just kind of made me figure out, don't mess with them witches, Nick.
And this happened after you broke the drug bust there.
We broke up the drug bust, meaning that she wasn't selling them there, right? Who knows what she was doing when she left, okay? But I like to think we broke up the drug bust because she wasn't getting the prescription pills, because she wasn't working there anymore.
And the cops didn't want anything to do with that footage.
We let them know about it, but no, ultimately not.
And you said, hey, we have evidence. We have video evidence of this occurring.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's Ring cameras. At the end of the day, I know it's a prescription drug. Like I can point to the video. Yeah, but it still
seems like it would be enough for them to be curious.
I'm not going to blame law enforcement. They're busy. They are, especially the sheriff's office. They're incredibly busy. That's why Eureka Police's POP is so good, because that's the one group that actually goes and like starts the investigation. And
POP being?
It's problem-oriented policing. I don't know if they still do it, but they were fantastic like 10 years ago. What they would do is they were the ones that would go to like 10 motels at once and basically get in there and do massive raids on the bad guys. And they were incredibly effective. The idea of POP was don't just react to the call, do some due diligence and prevent the crime from happening. Targeting people that you kind of know or have a track record of being naughty. And it was an incredibly effective program. I know about it because I used to talk about it on the air. They were always sending in press releases about how effective they were. And they seriously, back in the day, they would take on like 10 locations at once, 8 locations, 5 locations. I feel like they finally wound down their activities maybe around the final battle with the whole Floyd Squire estate thing. They were big on cutting down some of those drug houses that were such a problem in Old Town. That was the last I heard of the POP. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn on that. I don't know if they're still around, but they were incredibly effective at the time. Sheriff's office, they're like, I think at half staff. They don't have a POP. They're just trying to maintain a massively large region. Humboldt County is a huge region, and it's got so many parts that are very hard to get to. I still am always surprised if I have to go somewhere in Humboldt that I've never been before, just how big this county is. It's incredible. And the sheriff's office has to govern the whole thing. So I don't take it personally. People need to step up and, fight evil where it is, confront evil where it is, I should say. And that was our little way of doing it. Her slashing the tires, of course, put a fire under us to do the right thing. But I'm just glad it's over. But I'm not glad with the weird spiritual activity that was left at the place, because I've never seen a ghost in my life until now, 42 years old, 40 at the time.
Did anything else happen after that, or was it just that one instance?
There was other stuff. I don't want to get it wrong because, I don't remember everything exactly, but that one thing.
That was kind of the start of something.
That was the end. I mean, she'd already been gone.
No, but start of the paranormal experience?
Yeah, you feel weird things. Just feelings. Nothing that I can really point to. The only actual thing I ever saw was that I can say with 100% certainty, absolutely. I mean, 8 feet. It's one thing if it fell off and landed straight down. And it wasn't just a downward diagonal, an 8-foot diagonal, and you felt rage. There was this momentary feeling of huge anger. And it wasn't my anger. You know how sometimes somebody somehow can put a feeling into your head? It was like that. I felt this huge anger from an outside source for like 1 second during the moment that it happened. Then it was gone, and friggin' weird. Absolutely friggin' weird. That's why I wanted you to talk to John. That's another guy that I sent you, because he went to a country that used to, we're getting crazy here. He went to a country that used to practice cannibalism. And so he had some stories about that were friggin' nuts, with ghosts and all that. But he would be an incredible interview if you can get him. But yeah, that was my only experience with it. I'm not a ghost hunter. I'm not a crypto searcher. I'm really not. But I just have an interest like anybody else would, just a general curiosity in Bigfoot and things like that. But Humboldt's incredibly witchy. There's so much of a following with that stuff, and it's a lot of it's not a good thing.
Well, I think it's just because we're so remote up here, that it kind of breeds that air.
Probably that redwood curtain, get away with all kinds of things.
When I was a kid, I had a really bad cough for a while, really bad cough.
Yeah,
and it would occur at night, especially. And my mom used to take me onto our back porch and she would rock me to sleep because the doctor told her that the cold air might help.
Oh, wow.
And so we did that. And one night we were out there, I'd been coughing, and we have this fenced in backyard. And off to the right side of the fence, there were these 2 figures up over the fence, almost kind of standing behind the fence, but peeking over.
Oh, yeah.
And they had black silhouettes and these huge white eyes. And there were 2 of them.
Okay.
And they were just watching. And I always felt, I don't know if they were aliens. I don't know if they were ghosts. I don't know what the story was, but they definitely weren't human.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that they were there for a nefarious purpose. I thought they were just there waiting to see if I was going to die. Wow. And then they were going to do whatever they were going to do, but they were just watching. And I remember I was kind of looking at them, and then I looked at my mom and I was like, "Do you see them?" And she was like, "Shh, there's nobody there." And then I didn't bring it back up.
Was it just kind of like I know, or
I
more
don't
like
remember.
Let's move this on? She's still alive?
Yeah, she's
okay.
And I've never brought it. We've never spoken about it. I've never brought it back up to her. I probably should. I don't know. I don't know if she would remember it.
How would you forget something like that?
I don't think she saw them. I think it was just, it's maybe 2 a.m. She's tired. I'm coughing.
Well, two of them. One would be, okay.
Two of them. And one was slightly
wild.
shorter than the other.
Huh.
And it was just a weird, almost like a Pac-Man. You know, the shape of the ghost in Pac-Man, just the top kind of curvature.
Huh.
It was just that, and then these bright white eyes.
Here in Humboldt.
Wow.
There's a lot of stuff we don't know. I mean, there really is. That's friggin' wild.
It was a weird experience.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that.
And I believe my sister, I haven't talked to her about this either, but I believe she saw something in the backyard of our house one night, like a ghost or something, but not those specific shapes.
This is where you also get into people. It's what's true is a moving target in the sense that if I'm getting 40% of my information, which sometimes is true from people, it's going to be wrong. It's not going to be right. So it's like, you saw that. The guy in the van I told you about saw what he saw. Well, you might have, if you could easily look at one and think it's the other. You could think, oh, that shadowy thing was a Bigfoot, or that shadowy thing was an alien.
You could do that with a dog.
You could do that with a dog.
What? There's a werewolf outside, especially in the woods. If
Yeah.
you're in the woods at night and you start seeing a tree blowing, oh, something's over there.
And your mind will throw all kinds of things at you.
Yeah, start going to a dark place.
Yep, you can. And I work really hard not to. I wake up grateful every day. I'm extremely grateful. I have huge energy. My energy's in the roof, high frequency, which you have to have it in selling. You can't wrap yourself up in a bad mood, roll into work, and make people buy stuff. It's not going to happen. You've got to be happy, upbeat, high frequency, and there's all kinds of ways to do that. So I don't go looking. I really don't. Despite the first 3 hours of our talk right now, I don't go looking for this stuff. I really don't. But I think what happens, and I'm just working this out. I think the higher frequency you let out, the more consciousness that you have, the more you see, right? Obviously. Well, if you see more when you're operating at a higher consciousness, maybe that's why later in my life, I'm dealing with more of this kind of stuff because I don't know, just interesting.
Well, counter to that is they say kids see a lot of these spiritual beings.
I've heard that.
And the argument is that they don't have the life that we have once you get past a certain age where you kind of just brush those things to the side.
Biases happen.
Yeah, Santa's not real.
Yeah.
Easter Bunny's not real. Ghosts aren't real.
Crushing disappointment.
But if you're a kid and you haven't had all that instilled in you yet, and you see these things talking to a imaginary friend.
Well, part of growing pains, right, is unlearning what your parents teach you, what society teaches you, and trying to figure out, and you're not unlearning all of it, but you have to unlearn the stuff that doesn't work in the future. And that's that balance, right? That's that point where kids, when they're born for like the first 8 to 12, 15 years, they idolize their parents, then they hate them for a few years, and then they humanize them. And the sooner a parent can get their child through that really rough patch and get to the humanizing, the better. But you can't do it too quick because then you disrupt the cycle. And that's a tough thing to do. I'm a big believer in we don't make our kids work hard enough. We're way too soft. You read the old stories of like Cornelius Vanderbilt, right, who took over his dad's, ultimately built his own ferry company, to ferry people across the bay. People don't realize he was 11 years old when he captained his dad's ferry boat and took people across the bay there. 11 years old, by himself, according to what I've read. If you did that today, if your dad let you run a boat and transport passengers across a New York harbor, you'd be called child services. You
wouldn't even get that far.
It wouldn't even happen.
You wouldn't get to the point where they'd be on the boat.
No. But that's the thing is I'm a big believer in hard work for kids. Not necessarily a coal mine, but we've gotten way too soft. We gotta pull it back. But
do you think that's just because life has gotten so comfortable?
It's too comfortable. We're in danger. It's kind of like I bounce around a lot in discussions, right? I foresee Amazon not making it another 10 to 15 years.
The business,
yeah. And the reason
really?
The reason why is they have a huge hollow leg that they're standing on. That hollow leg is they are being subsidized by the Postal Service, and it's criminal. The taxpayers are subsidizing the Amazon with the Postal Service because they have an unfair advantage every single package that they sell. And the rise of the third-party websites that are competing with Amazon. That would be like Walmart.com. That would be what's going on in India with some of their sites. That would be not Target, but TJ Maxx, I think, is rolling out a third-party platform. The more of these third-party platforms that come up that are going to compete directly against Amazon, their lobbyists are all going to have one job: dethrone Amazon from getting the special cushy deal they have with the Postal Service. When the Postal Service has to charge Amazon like they charge everybody else, and everything gets fair again, Amazon will lose, in my mind, their number one competitive advantage, which is essentially paid for shipping. And that gives them same-day shipping ability. And they have used and abused our postal system like never before. Talk to a postal worker about how unfair it is, and they'll fill you in. It's crazy.
Isn't Jeff Bezos pushing for Trump to privatize the Postal Service? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, Jeff Bezos gave one of his coffers $1 million, but that's just lobbying. Bezos, it's kind of like when Walmart used to be very Republican in the sense that they were not for socialized medicine. This is a case study. This is something that you can point to as being kind of representative of what happens in crony capitalism. Walmart at one point was absolutely against single-payer systems. They were against socialized medicine, right? Today they're for it. They were against the minimum wage. Now they're for it. Why is that? Well, they are for things that drive out their competition. So Walmart figured out in a boardroom one day, why are we against socialized medicine? Let's make it a thing. Let's make it harder for our competitors to compete with us. Same thing with the minimum wage. Walmart can absorb the minimum wage increase. TJ Maxx can't, right? And so what happens is government gets too big, as it usually does. Corporations get very big, and they figure out, I can make the system harder on me, but impossible for my competition. And that leads to crony capitalism, which is what we have today.
Well, they've been trying to do that with AI. I think Sam Altman's been doing that a lot, trying to build a wall around their artificial intelligence. But if Bezos is pushing to privatize the USPS, would it just be because then maybe he would be the one to take over that Amazon would absorb that?
I haven't looked into it, but my general thought on that would be whatever he's doing, he's going to try to make it harder for his competition.
But if they are reliant on that, why would you try to diminish that business if you've already got a sweet spot with the Postal Service?
I'm playing a guessing game here. My thought would be either A, he knows that this is a huge Achilles heel for him, because when you build a business on anything that's artificial, it gets more hollow, and the hollower it gets, eventually it cracks. And when it cracks, everything tumbles. Well, I mean, he has to know that, he's got to know that. So either he recognizes that and he wants to work a deal with Trump to keep the deal ironclad, which is the smart move, because Trump might go for that if the deal's good enough. If, Bezos is a powerful dude. If Bezos says, look, Mr. President, if I can bring $1 trillion of business in the next 20 years in exchange for this and this, Trump's going to listen. Trump's a deal maker. Trump knows the world's not perfect. He's not going to necessarily look at it politically like I might and say, well, Amazon's actually got a huge liability here. Let me help them, give them a nudge to get out of their competitive position and let these competitors. Trump's not going to be like that. He's a deal maker. He's going to look at Amazon, look at what they're offering, and say, basically, it'll be binary, yes or no. Should the government do this deal? That's how I think he looks at things, which is so great that he's got Vivek and Elon coming in for Doge for efficiency, because while Trump's making deals, he's got a good crew this time. Hopefully making government actually smaller, making it more efficient, and reducing its size. That's my hope. His first team was atrocious. I actually have a painting in my office from John McNaughton of Trump crossing the swamp. It was a famous painting, and it's a boat kind of similar to like George Washington, right, when you cross the Potomac. But on this boat, you've got Nikki Haley, you got Bolton, you got all these losers, and I'm looking at this painting, which is a majestic painting, but it's got Pence on there. It's a majestic painting, but it's a boat full of losers. The only winner on there is Trump and his wife. The rest of everybody on the boat in my office on this painting are losers. Well, this time he's not doing that. I like everybody that he's bringing on board, because they're not owned by the deep state. They're free thinkers, and they all kind of want the same thing. It's kind of like when you hire people, you want somebody that has an obsession. You want there to be a crossover obsession with what you're actually offering. Because if they have a bad day, their obsession will carry them through to making sure that they're still a good salesman. If they have no obsession with what they're doing, then their bad days are really bad and you're wasting money on them, right? That's what Trump is doing this time. He's getting people to have an obsessive streak about the job. Vivek, Alon are obsessed. They were probably born obsessed. Pete Hegseth for Department of Defense, obsessed. He's obsessed with veterans getting a fair shake. Every single one of his picks, maybe not every single one, most of them have that obsession for the job, which is what you need if you want to reform anything.
Do you think they'll actually make any concrete reforms, or do you think they're going up against a wall that's too big? They're
going up against a wall, but they have to if we're going to survive. They absolutely have to. I pray that they do. It's that bad. Where do you start? The regulatory agencies have taken over the role of Congress, and it's been that way for a long time. They're the fifth branch of government. If the media is the fourth branch, the independent regulatory agencies are the fifth. So what happens is it's a dog and pony show in Congress, right? And what I mean by that is it's all about fundraising. They tell their donors, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Meanwhile, the whole time, no matter what policy they pass, the real enforcement and the real laws that are being made are in the department, the executive wing. The executive department has the IR and the S. They have the EPA. They have others, ATF. These guys can make laws. They can make regulatory statutes because what they're doing is Congress does a loose thing of interpret it this way, but then the executive branch can decide how to interpret it. And they've been able to finagle a special arrangement where they can make laws essentially because they can decide how they interpret it.
Well, that's why Chevron deference was a big deal.
Yeah.
And that passing. And there was a lot of pushback on that. People
Absolutely.
were not happy. And that's why, speaking of which, the continuing resolution that they tried to drop, the 1,500 page.
Nobody reads these things.
How could you read that in 2 days?
No, you don't. And people are asking, why is it so quiet in Washington, D.C.? I can give you my opinion on why it's quiet. I can't prove it. But back when I worked in that world for a couple of years, I learned that a senator needs to make $10,000 a day. He needs to raise $10,000 a day. And this was back in 2007. Well, let's do some basic inflation on that. A senator needs to make $25,000 a day in fundraising. So what's going on now, in my opinion, is Trump's people are going to the Senate and they're going to the House, but they're focused on the Senate because that's where they really need the votes. And they're saying, look, Republicans especially, if you don't like the new agenda that's coming, if you don't like what we're doing, we're going to give you a severance package and you're going to quietly exit. You're going to exit stage right. We're not going to bully you because we need this done smoothly. Well, what people don't realize is when you are negotiating with a senator, you're not just talking to him. He's a figurehead of a massive coalition. And you got to have a coalition. If you are fundraising $25,000 a day, what kind of people are behind you? What kind of arrangements are set? You can't just go after one of them and knock them off and replace them in the primaries. I mean, you can, but you do so much damage behind the scenes. And so I think part of the two reasons why DC is so quiet right now is that conversation's happening. People are being offered severance packages or they're being offered to stay as long as they promise to follow the Trump agenda. And then the other reason it's so quiet is Kamala spent all the money and there's no money for the protesters. The pallets of bricks are not showing up to the location.
Spent money and ended up in debt.
Yeah.
Spent $1 billion.
Yes.
Didn't win a single swing state.
Not even one thing. That's what she would have done to the country. We got to get the monetary policy right. We got to get rid of the lobbyists. And the only way you do it is they lobby because they have influence, because the government plays in that space. You got to get government out of that space. And it's not going to personnel is policy. So you got to fire the personnel and then you'll have better policy. You know, the personnel you put in charge affect what the policy is going to be like. It's kind of like when I was talking about how the independent regulatory agencies are making the laws, the type of people that run EPA are making the laws because they've been given carte blanche on how to enforce it. Just to tie off that point.
And who elected those people?
Nobody.
Exactly.
Literally nobody. And that's your deep state. And this is a problem locally, statewide, and nationally. This is what people don't realize. When a president comes in, did you know he has to fill 100,000 positions? How are you going to do that in 4 years? You can't do that in 4 years. What happens is you change the heads, and then the heads are supposed to give you recommendations for middle management and then for the ground, right? For the whole spectrum in between. It's 100,000 positions. That's way too many. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care. It's too many. But it's gotten that big. because nobody ever edits it. There's no editing going on. And I just learned recently that tariffs are what built Germany and Japan after the war. I didn't know that until I dug into it and researched it. We basically said, because we made a ton of money in this country up until the 1900s, right? And we did it from tariffs. We had so much money, we didn't know what to do with it, right? You can look that up. It's crazy. And then, of course, we switched to the income tax system and some really bad stuff. But my point with that is we recognized that such wealth can be built from tariffs, that we used it to rebuild war-torn Japan and war-torn Germany. We said, tariff us, Germany, and you'll make a ton of money and you'll rebuild. And it worked. They rebuilt really quick. The problem is nobody came along and said, okay,
You've had enough.
Let's
Pump the brakes.
Let's pump the brakes a little bit. You're not a developing nation. In some ways, you're more advanced than we are. Let's keep it real here. And this is where I get really frustrated because people are like, wow, healthcare is so good in these other countries. Yeah, look at what their defense budget is. It's nothing.
Well, look at how much money
propping it up.
We're sending them.
Mm-hmm. You got to have that full accountability. It's very important. I love healthcare for everybody, but not like that. But anyway, we jump around a lot.
That's part of the fun of doing this.
That's right, yeah.
Well, and that's an argument that people have made for why Trump's first term went the way that it did.
Yeah.
Is you have this guy who's not well-versed in politics, hasn't been on the scene. He comes in and he just trusts the supposed experts to fill those positions, to fill his cabinet.
And before you bag on him for that, how many of us were in the dark on what was really going on? I mean, I volunteered for Bush-Cheney in the 2000s. I regret that. I really do. And now that
volunteered, what did that look like for you?
Volunteered on the campaign trail. I was in college at the time, and I would take my time off and go door to door, do the literature drop thing, run booths, talk to people about, if you're not with Bush, you're with Al Qaeda. I still have that.
Was this 2004?
This would have been 2004
for that
right?
campaign.
Yeah. I still have the bumper sticker, and I keep the bumper sticker because it's hideous. It's hideous where we were at in this country because the bumper sticker says Bush or Kerry, who would Al Qaeda vote for? And it's like, now we know so much. It's like, what a pile of crap. It's organized opposition. Both sides are in on it. And we're all waking up to this now. And so
some are,
not everybody. And it's
you see that with Syria right now when you hear Al Qaeda branded as rebels. These freedom fighters now have overthrown Assad.
That's
atrocious. Like, who are the freedom fighters? Oh, it's Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think we're learning that a lot of them came from the training camps in Afghanistan where we're sending a bunch of money. Sean Ryan, he's done a bunch of work on that. And
he's got a great podcast.
He's got a great podcast. I love it. It's one of the few I listen to. But if he's right about that, we are once again starting these problems that we shouldn't be starting.
So have you always been interested in politics? If you're in college and you're volunteering for
I
Bush.
went to school for political science. I was always interested in it. I didn't start out that way, but I listened to Rush since 1992. I'm a Ditto head, right? Listened to a lot of Rush, Limbaugh back in the day. And I always had an interest in politics from the early 90s. But I didn't understand how it gradually came into focus, how it's organized opposition. What I mean by that, who is the head of the Republicans and the Democrats is chosen behind the scenes, and both sides are in on it. Both sides were in on it up until Trump, which is crazy. That's my opinion. It's crazy when you think about that because it's like we're all in this matrix. We're all in this. We're all supposed to believe what we're told, and we now know. And I'm starting to unravel things from the decades. How much nonsense we were told. And with social media, we've been able to break down those barriers. And I hope that in our lifetime, the veil will keep lifting and we'll see what's really going on in this world because some crazy stuff. I don't know what it is, but look at what they've gotten away with. They've gotten away with a corrupt power structure for decades where the Iraq war was nonsense. The weapons of mass destruction were not real. We know this now, right? I mean, I think we are pretty sure of that. It's all about making money. These military defense contractors are making the government go do these things, and we all get, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's Iraq, or they're really trying to get us to war with Iran.
They're pretty damn close.
The Ukraine thing's interesting. I mean, it's easy to rant and rave, and I can do that. But the Ukraine thing specifically was interesting because when that started, and I don't know what to think of this, I'm just going to say it. webcamtaxi.com is a network of cameras around the world. And when the war started, I learned about this webcam taxi, and I went on there, and it's all public access cameras around the world. You can look at anything. It's kind of cool in real time. In real time. Well, when the war started, Russia turned off the lights. There was no internet in Ukraine. Alon stepped up to the plate and said, lights are back on. And he got his satellites in motion and got the cameras back on. And when the war started, you could look at Ukraine. You could see parts of Ukraine. And what's crazy to me is in the first 6 months of the first year, I would occasionally look. And people were going to work. People were on sailboats. People were in the nightclubs. I'm not saying, there's a war going on. I'm not crazy. I know there's a war. I'm seeing enough to know that. But it's also just crazy how in the first year, how little of a war there was in the main populated centers. What's going on? And then we have that American that testified about all the biolabs we have over there. Marco Rubio grilled that person, and that person was a government, I forget what her position was, but she was knowledgeable about the biolabs. So she's talking with Marco Rubio. This is public. You can look it up. Not on Google, but I'm from a trusted source. You can look it up. And she said we had biolabs, like as many as, I want to say 42 biolabs in Ukraine. What's going on? The webcams that I'm looking at show no war. The media, of course, is showing nothing but war. Why am I not seeing it? And then gradually, as time went by, the number of webcams that were open went from many dozens to 6. Now, I don't know what's going on, but that's wild. That is really wild to me. And I don't know what that means. But that's what we got to do. We got to ask questions. We got to find things like that and then just start asking why and put it out there in the social media. Don't lead with a theory. I don't know why. But what I do know is we're spending billions of dollars that are going to the military-industrial complex, and I'm not seeing the payoff. Like, I can't get my road fixed. My road has not been repaved in front of the music store for 15 years. Can I have a little bit of that money? Can I have some of it for my roads?
What do you take that to mean?
The Ukraine thing?
Yeah, that you're seeing these images and you're seeing these webcams in these metropolitan areas.
I blame the deep state, the globalists, because we have had treaties with Russia. We had understanding with Russia, whether it be the Missile Defense Treaty, but we had border treaties where we said, okay, we are not going to push NATO into Ukraine. In exchange for not doing that, Russia, you will give us this and that. I don't remember what it was. Russia agreed to our terms, but then we keep changing the deal. We keep monkeying with elections around the world. We know that. We were probably involved with Zelensky winning, right? It didn't just happen, right? We were probably involved. Our CIA was probably involved. So it's like, I don't like anybody that makes a deal with somebody and then works behind the scenes to make it a bad deal for them. You make a deal, you got to stick to the deal. And so if you really look at it from that perspective, I think we lied to the Russians. I think we said, yeah, sure, we'll treat Ukraine this way. We won't invite them into NATO. We won't do these different things. And for them, that was a red line. Now, I don't want to see Russia go to war with anybody. I'm not a Russia apologist. I'm not in anything. That's the thing. I don't care. I really don't. But I do care about our word as a country, right? If we say we're not going to do X, Y, and Z, we should do our best to follow that, right? We had the opportunity to work with the Russians on a missile defense system. We could have had a decent missile defense system for the whole world. That was something that Putin brought up again in his interview with Tucker Carlson.
And the fact that he tried to join NATO.
And he wanted to join NATO. It's like, yeah, okay, keep poking this nuclear power with a stick. Isn't that great? Why don't you work with them?
But specifically for the cameras, do you take that to mean that the war is not as serious as they're portraying it?
In the first year, the war was not as serious as they were portraying because the media was saying, Kiev is under assault. Okay, great, fine. I bring up the Kiev cameras. I'm looking at Kiev in real time on webcamtaxi.com. I'm looking at it. People are going to work. The roads are congested with cars going to work. The only evidence in the first year from webcamtaxi.com, again, public accessible cameras, okay? This is not crackpot stuff. This is a site that people use for things, okay? I don't consume much fringe media, believe it or not. I really don't. I don't, because it's fringe. You can't prove it. The only evidence that there was a war was one camera of a whole bunch of people standing in line waiting to leave. One of the exit points for the country, there was a public camera there, and you could see all the people with their luggage waiting for the bus, waiting to clear their papers and waiting to leave. So, no, the war, of course it's happening, but something's up. and something has been up, and
Well,
I don't understand.
You're not going to have cameras on the front lines where the people are actually dying, right?
No.
Ukraine is fairly remote.
But if Kiev's under siege in that first year, why didn't I see anything?
Oh yeah, I think
That's weird,
you could
right?
chalk that up to them trying to garner support for this war, saying, "Oh, the capital of Ukraine is under attack right now," regardless of whether or not it actually is.
Where are the tanks? Where's the stuff? You know what I mean? I've seen a lot of the social media, which I'm sure you have too, of things blowing up.
I've seen a lot of people dying.
It's horrendous. I know it's happening. Don't get me wrong. It's happening, right? But so is what I'm seeing. And I don't watch it. I don't look at the cameras anymore because there's not as many of them, right? It pared down to 6 the last time I looked. So yeah, okay, maybe the war is closer to the business end of Ukraine. Maybe it's closer to the sieging Kiev. I don't know. But these are the questions we have to ask. We have to use our technology to get answers because mass media is not going to inform us. And so we're all left to our own devices, which isn't good. I have so little faith in our government. To give you a crazy example, well, no, this is an easy example. Our governor this morning or yesterday put us into a state of emergency over the bird flu. Now, bird flu is serious. I know somebody whose wife died from the bird flu. It's a serious thing. And I'm not going to joke about it because I know somebody who died from it. But here's the problem. They've cried wolf so many times. I'm not going to act any different. We're not masking up. We're definitely within 6 feet. Nothing the government says I believe anymore. How do they get their integrity back? Well, with me, the only way is to start telling the truth and demonstrate that they're being truthful. And that's a high bar. And then I have to ask myself, am I ever going to give them that grace again? I don't know.
I don't even know if that's the first step. I think the first step is accountability for all of the lies.
That's a great point. It's a great point.
I think you have to start there. You have to show the public that you messed up and you're going to hold yourself accountable, and then maybe we'll start to give you some more of that trust.
But if Trump steps up, and he's as transparent as can be compared to presidents, right? He's very transparent. And if he makes the government accountable again, are we putting our faith in government or are we putting our faith in Mr. Trump, right? It's just an interesting point. Can the government actually be nonpartisan, and can it actually do its job without the nonsense? I don't see it until you change the personnel. But then getting back to that point of will I ever have faith in them again? I don't know, because this is life and death stuff. If the CDC comes out and says, okay, we got a new strain of Ebola, don't worry. We got a new strain of Ebola, you need to do this and this and this. Guess what? I'm ignoring it. You know how twisted that is? You know how crazy that is? Because I could die because I'm ignoring it. But I don't trust them like I don't. I have zero trust for them.
When did that change start to take place for you? How do you go from campaigning for Bush to saying what you're saying now?
Great question. I had so many opportunities to see the truth, and I was pig-headed. I didn't want to. I was too divested. Okay. You know how I started by saying I get 40% of my information from people, like real people? It was maybe 5% when I was that age. Most of my information came from the mass media. It came from the mass media. I was programmed, like so many are. And so it had to unveil itself gradually. I couldn't stomach McCain. I did everything I could when McCain was our guy to point out the atrocious way that he treated veterans when those veterans' families wanted the records released. You know who's our veterans from the Vietnam War era, the families of the veterans, I should say, wanted military records released. This is another really nasty one you can look up. McCain was one of the biggest impediments to that. He did not want records released. I don't know why, but I was disgusted with him for that and for just being an all-around rhino who, he's not conservative at all, right? But I still voted for him. I didn't campaign for him, but I still voted for him. I think it was just gradual, but it all really happened with COVID for me.
I think it happened with COVID for a lot of people.
You think I would have caught on sooner because I was paying attention, but I think sometimes when you're too close to the source of the problem, you lose the perspective. And of course, 15 years I'm running the business. I'm busy with store stuff, You
got real life shit.
I got real life shit, yeah. But no, for me, to be honest with you, it would have been the last 6 years where I could truly look at it and say, it's deep state farce. The globalists have been running the world and we have to stop it. And about 6 years. Because if you had told my past version of myself 8 years ago that, I wouldn't have believed it. Yeah, I was pretty thick-headed on this. But it comes down to programming. And the more people can, I think you should do a detox. Like you detox your body once in a while, right? There's health benefits to that, right? Liver detox, things like that. You need to have a news detox. Like you need to turn off all the legacy news for 30 days. Don't look at it on your phone. Don't look at it on TV. Turn it off for 30 days and then just see how you feel. Do you feel better? Okay, notate that. Then maybe watch the news, but do it less. You got to detox, because I can't tell you how many people will come in and they want to talk about an issue and then they start talking. And I have to be, I'm going to be polite because that's the kind of guy I am, but it takes me 5 seconds to realize that they're only telling me what they were programmed to say, not what they actually think deep down.
It's like you're talking to the TV.
And
I just, oh, this is a rough way to go through life, man.
Yeah, it's very rough. And I did that for a big chunk of my life. And a lot of people did. We just didn't, a lot of us just didn't realize how corrupt it all is. And occasionally I'll run into people that claim to have known for longer. Like people in college that I was friends with, they knew. Some of them knew, and they tried to tell me, but I was just like, oh, no, you're a this or a that. You're, And
conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, they were right. They were right about all of it.
The problem is, some of them are wrong. And that's why it's easy to write them off, because then they start going flat earth.
Yeah.
Or all of these other things. You're like,
there's so much of that stuff.
That's obviously can't follow you.
No. But that's part of the, it's the lies in plain sight. You've got governments around the world, Russia, North Korea, they had that thing in Macedonia of all places, that are pumping out nonsense that sounds really close to the truth. And they've got their own aims. Each country has their own aim, including ours, for pumping out nonsense into the airwaves. And our government likes to take a story, twist one little thing about it, and the first story that goes out is true, but the second story that follows it is false. And they do that all the time. A good example was very recently, and it'll come to me, but that those physicians that died in the plane crash in Brazil, so many things are happening right now that we're not paying attention to that are right in front of us. There were 7 physicians on there, and supposedly they were on their way to do a dissertation on something that would make Big Pharma look bad. That story was real. You can see the video of the plane hitting the ground. It was a plane crash. They don't know why. The power turned off on the thing and it crashed. Well, a story that came out right after that was totally bogus. But that story that was bogus had to do with the plane crash being shot down by a government or something. Well, that story was obvious trash. But the initial story of what those physicians were going to be doing was real. They like to couple nonsense with the truth. You have to look at the second story that immediately comes out, and that's the false story. That's the false narrative. And you'll go crazy trying to figure this stuff out, which is why I try to take the broader perspective, get the information, collaborate it with people I know, and maybe get an idea what's going on. But you probably noticed I bounce around a lot, and I don't say definitively this is this or this is that. I just know it's corrupt as hell. And it's going to be okay for me because I can sell stuff. No matter where you put me, I can sell things. I'll be okay. My girlfriend and I will survive. We're doers. You're the one that's screwed because inflation is a disaster. The only way you make it in this country, the only way to live the American dream, you have to have 2 incomes and a side hustle. That's crazy. You should be able to have 1 good income and make it in this country. You can't anymore. To keep up with inflation and to live the American dream of owning a house, owning a business, having a family, you got to have 2 incomes and a side hustle. That's my personal belief. It's really sad. And when Nixon detached the dollar from the gold standard, this started that, right? That's why women started joining the workforce, because the families needed to make the money, right? The 50s are over.
Well, then that plays into programming because you've detached children from the household.
Exactly. And that's why killing the Department of Education is so essential. And of course, the people that are programmed think, oh no, we're going to set our education back to the Stone Age. No, we're going to turn it over to the states. So if you care about education, get invested with your school board. Talk to your teachers. Make sure that you're offering a good education at home. Fight for a school bond measure if you really are that passionate. If you really want more money for education, go do that. Don't rely on the federal government. They're not doing a good job with education. We're like, for developing countries, we're almost at the bottom of the list. But we spend a fortune. That is ridiculous. We spend so much money on education, we should be pumping out experts. We should be pumping out people that are ready to hit the ground on day one. The problem why your generation is screwed is because you're entering the workforce and you have not been taught how to build a business. You haven't been taught about how running a business in today's world, well, it's always been a game, but it's a game of write-offs. It's a game of that has to be played a certain way. And I've had employees that didn't even know how to write a check and didn't know where the stamp went. And that's not their fault. They weren't taught. You're being put in a system that you're not taught how to use on purpose. So they can get you in debt. So they can get you in school debt and get you in credit card debt and other things.
Which has been incredibly effective.
Which has been incredibly effective. And it's ridiculous. It's a horrible thing. I feel like a piano is going to fall on me after this podcast.
No, no, there's only good energy in here. So you're
okay.
covered.
All right.
It sounds like there's good energy at the music store too. So I think
there is. Yeah. We really try to. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I see any of that changing. I'm hopeful for this administration, if for nothing else other than the fact that Trump has people I think are good around him. Like you said, Vivek, Elon.
It's the only
I like
chance.
Tulsi.
Yeah. Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No.
It's the only chance we're going to get. That's the thing. This is the only president we're going to get. It's the only opportunity we're going to get to do it in a nice, legal, peaceful, structured way that's good for everybody. Because the deep state, with all of the voter fraud, with the mail-in ballots and all the fraud that's going on with that, the 2,000 Mules documentary,
Hasn't that been, I'm pretty sure Dinesh D'Souza came out and said that his documentary was not true.
I don't think that's true.
I believe the information that they had, the video evidence of those ballot boxes was not corroborated. And they believe that it was. I believe Dinesh has come out and since said this.
He might have done that because maybe he faced legal trouble, kind of like with Alex Jones and Sandy Hook.
I think whoever had vetted that data, I believe that was the point of contention, that it's not. The cameras didn't line up with the ballot boxes that they supposedly had.
I can't speak for Dinesh, but I would turn you over to Greg Phillips and Catherine Engelbrecht. They're the ones that did the work.
Yeah, but he's the one that created the documentary.
He's the one that
right?
made the movie. Yeah. So, if he said that,
I feel fairly I'm not 100%. I feel like 80% certain that has come out recently, maybe in the past month or two.
I'm sorry to hear that he said that, but I know that Greg Phillips and Catherine Engelbrecht have done incredible work having to do with chronicling where the ballots are coming from, who's doing the harvesting. So I take issue with Dinesh on that. I don't think that's right. Now, maybe we can't cite 2,000 Mules. Maybe you're right about that. I haven't looked into that. I'll have to look at it. But I've been following Greg Phillips and Catherine for years, and they're rock stars. I mean, they are above reproach. They've been arrested. They've been vindicated. They beat the charges because what they're doing, the work they're doing, is legit. And they were working hand in hand with Charlie Kirk and his organization, which I'm blanking on. And basically, the only reason we won was because one of the reasons we won, not the only reason, but one of the big reasons was we went out and signed up more people to vote this time around than the party's never done that. Charlie Kirk did a big talk about that. The party always goes after that mushy middle, trying to get those undecideds. And that's how I learned too years ago, is you go for the mushy middle and you try to convince enough because you just assume your people will come out. Well, Charlie basically said, no, we need to expand the base. And that's what they did. So I believe that there is fraud going on. I really do. But I will look into what Dinesh said. I
the
definitely
question
will.
is just how much.
Yeah.
I don't understand the people that say there's no voter fraud. The question is to what extent. I had a lawyer on from Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Yeah.
And they were litigating a case of voter fraud that was concrete. And a quote from the judge was something crazy like he'd never seen this level of voter fraud. It was shocking and appalling. And it's just understood in Bridgeport that if you want to win an election, you're going to buy it. You're going to pay for it. And it's been that way for decades. And so the question is, this is the largest city in Connecticut. If it's happening there, it's only happening there? I'm not saying it's every city or a majority of cities, but to what extent? What are the actual numbers?
The only way to restore faith, the American people's faith in the voting system, is going to be to get rid of having mail-in ballots be the number one way to do it.
Same day, in person.
Same day, in
paper
person.
ballots.
And of course, I'm totally open to a few mail-in ballots. If you've got somebody that can't get outside, can't get down the street, it's government. Government's a blunt instrument. So you're going to have to figure out how to write that so that everybody can vote. It's really important. But it wasn't meant to be like this. It wasn't meant... California, the last time I checked, California has 144% voter rolls. And how does that happen? Well, it's because when you move around in the state, they're really good at keeping track of where you go. Every time you make an address, that place potentially can get a ballot. And so then you get those stories of, wow, I've lived in 3 different places in the last 5 years. It turns out all 3 of those got a ballot. Well, if just one person takes that, signs my name on it and the signature, whatever, and it gets in there, mine gets, discounted. But what happens with California is, my understanding, they're okay at keeping it tight if you move within the state. Where California falls apart is in 2 key places. And I'm trying not to be conspiratorial. I'm trying to stick with what I know. The 2 places where they get burned are when you leave the state and come back. For some reason, the system's not very good at that, and they don't edit the rolls. And then the other way is DMV. DMV in general is its own organization. Whenever you're trying to mirror 2 different portals, you'll never get them to be in sync perfectly. I know that because my business is on like 5 different portals, and only 2 of them are synced, right? The ones that are not synced, it's an incredible amount of work to keep them congruous, right? And part of what you don't do is when the portals are not in sync, you don't put all the data on there, right? Well, okay, DMV and the state are incredibly complex organizations. So all those ballots that go through DMV electronically, you're telling me they're going to go through there and credibly line up with the state's record of where you live? Give me a break, right? I mean, you can see how that's a problem. And the voter rolls have always been, not always, but for a long time, the voter rolls have been problematic in California. When Mark Mosier was running, this was like the number 1 issue he ran on. He was running for Secretary of State. Good guy. He didn't really have a chance because, Republican. But his number 1 campaign issue was, and he would totally do this if you want to talk to him more about it, he was able to lay out why the voter rolls were the way they are and why it was 144%. Because it should be 100 or less. It shouldn't be 144%. That's a whole bunch of duplicates. And it's been that way for a long time.
My question is always poised off Taiwan. Taiwan obviously is concerned about election interference being so close to China and their geopolitical stances. They do paper ballots and in-person same-day voting.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about any outside influence.
Good point. They can do it. Why can't we?
Yeah. And they count them quickly. I believe in maybe same day, a day max, maybe. Something crazy like that. California was still counting ballots up to maybe a week or 2 ago.
I think we have the capability of doing it. I'm pretty sure.
I don't see why we couldn't.
I don't either.
I get that we have a vastly larger population than Taiwan does, but still.
I think once you pare back, the people that actually debate this, if you pare back the objections that are the supportive comments for mail-in ballots, it's mostly just assumptions that the government will do the right thing and handle it the right way.
Because they always do.
Because they always do.
And
it's like, until they don't, we had a lot, this is why I wanted to get into pivoting off of Dinesh's comment, some proof. Georgia, the Fulton office, we had to stop that office from opening early, like days early for voters. They wanted to open like 4, 5, 6 days before the typical time to take ballots. It was a lawsuit from the RNC that stopped that office from opening early, and that office is in a deep blue part of Georgia. So we have multiple lawsuits like that where our observers who are recruited to go to all these different places and observe cheating, these observers called the team of lawyers at the RNC and said, hey, we need this, we need that. And the only reason that we won this thing was by expanding our base and by taking the law directly, point by point, where it needed to be applied. That's what people don't get. Trump didn't just win because Kamala was so bad. He won because he expanded the base and strategically sued the bad actors in the moment. And part of where the data came for where to put those lawsuits was Greg Phillips and Catherine Engelbrecht, who were part of the 2000 Mules documentary. So when I hear what you told me about Dinesh, I really am looking forward to digging into that because the 2 key people he worked with were key people in focusing these lawsuits, which got us the election. Here's the problem, though. If we don't straighten out not only the government, which we've been talking about, but if we don't straighten out how ballots are counted, and if we can get away from mail-in ballots, Are we always going to have a legal construct of lawyers that can go sue the bad actors in the moment? Are we always going to have that on our side? I don't think so. So that's what I mean. We have a very limited window to get this right. And it scares me. I mean, I'm optimistic, but it scares me too, because we got 4 years and that's it to get this right.
Did you ever see Hacking Democracy?
I heard about it. I've never seen it.
You should watch it. It's really good. Really good. That was kind of my first introduction to voter fraud as a concept.
I'm definitely going to watch it.
Great documentary.
Okay.
But
nice.
Where I was going with that is Democrats like to pretend that they've never cried voter fraud, but they have.
Several times.
They did in that documentary. They did with the hanging Chad issue.
That's right.
But it's just memory hold to some extent, where voter fraud was never an issue until suddenly in 2020.
You're absolutely right about that. What if...
And it's both sides, to be clear. It's
yes.
Republicans and Democrats have been crying voter fraud for a long time.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, 2020, it just became a Republican issue.
Well, they cried it for Hillary in 2016 for sure. And
Hillary, I bet if you quoted her to this day, would still say there was Russian interference.
But here's the thing: I think it was Lincoln that said it. In a free republic, ballots replace bullets. So ballots are the civilized way that we change our government, and that's why they're so essential. If you don't have legit ballots, you are reduced to strife. And the last thing we need, after the roller coaster that this country has been through, over however far back you want to go, since the early 2000s, particularly, we don't need strife with our elections. It's the glue. It's part of the glue that holds us together. It's one of those things. It's one of those essentials is our elections. If you want to break a country, mess around with the election. That's why it's so serious. And I don't care who's upset about it, Democrats, Republicans, whatever. We need to have faith in our ballots. I didn't have any faith in the ballots when I voted for Trump in this last election. I haven't had faith in the ballots for about 8 years. But I had faith in our team and our lawyers doing the right thing. That was where my faith was. It wasn't in the process. And that's not good. That's not a good thing, because the time's going to come where we're going to lose an election. And, we need to have that faith in the process. And that faith comes from accountability, transparency, doing the right thing. And that's just one of the many things we got to fix in 4 years.
It'll be interesting to see if they can do it.
Yeah. And locally, we're it's a mess too. Because locally, you've got the ward system, which is no good, and you have ranked choice voting, which we haven't really done yet. Basically, when the radical left took over Eureka in 2018, in that process, they were able to put a system in place to make it impossible for anyone that's not hard-boiled radical left to be in City Hall. And the process that keeps that from happening is the ward system and ranked choice voting, because you have to take all the time, knock on all the doors, have the bigger team, and get the vote out. And for people that actually have lives that are very busy, that's a hard thing to do. So they've made it virtually impossible for other types of perspectives to get on City Hall. And that's just reality. That's not talking specifically about me, but just going forward, our city is only going to get radical left elected.
Now, when you say radical leftists, what do you mean by that?
Who's in there now? You've got people in there. Okay, so when the radical left takes over an organization or takes over a government, some of the things that happen is they neutralize the checks that balance them out. So we have committees. Those committees have been neutralized gradually over the last few years. You saw what happened with Jeff Reagan. Was he the property committee? I'm trying to remember.
I'm not familiar with the name.
There's another guy on the budget committee who's been telling me over the years the shenanigans going on over there. I don't want to speak for him. I'll get you his info if you're interested. I haven't sent it to you yet. But I can point to several key things where the reason committees matter is the committees take complex information, break it down, ask the right questions, kind of like what we're doing here, except 4 people, talking to an expert. They break it down, and then they make a recommendation to the city council. Well, what happens is if you break down all these committees that are supposed to funnel recommendations and good information that's actually coming from the public, if you're not getting that input, you're going to make bad decisions. So radical left typically only have a cadre of a few people they actually listen to. So they're not listening to the committees. If they're not listening to the committees and they're not listening to the public, and you can ask anybody that still goes there and sits through the public comment period, they're not being listened to. Who are they listening to? Right? So in my opinion, when a radical leftist takes over a government, they dissolve the things that hold them back. They dissolve the committees. The guy that I can put you in touch with on the budget committee, Jeff Reagan, are just two examples.
What makes you say that they're not listening to the public? Just the public comment in these Eureka City Council meetings?
The public comments, but I don't think you can point to anything since 2018 that the public's been able to get done that the city council wanted. In my opinion, this is why I supported Measure F, even though it failed abysmally. In my opinion, part of being radical left is they will trip over their friends, family, and neighbors to get grant money. That's all they care about, is keeping their very small people, a group of people that they listen to, happy and go get that grant money. That's all they do, to the detriment of our future.
But Measure F is almost a prime example of that, in that people voted not to pass that.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I'd love to really dig into that and see why it failed. $1.8 million. That's interesting. That's very interesting. There's probably some lessons to take from that on how to go moving a policy in the future.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money.
To bet on a losing horse.
To bet on a losing horse. But yeah, that's the point I was getting at, though, is we have to look at local, state, and federal and look at the system itself and make sure that that system isn't holding back the people's voice. And if it is holding back the people's voice, make sure it's for a good reason. Like a representative republic, the goal is you want the views of the majority represented, but you never want the minority to be oppressed. So it's that balance, right? That's the definition of a republic, right? Democratic republic. If you've got a system on the ground that makes it impossible for other perspectives to win, you're going down a really bad road, in my opinion.
So do you think that people just aren't aware of the politicians that they're voting into office at a city council level?
Well, yeah. I mean, absolutely. A lot, especially in some of the wards. Some of the wards are a high rental community. When you're running for office, you buy the voter rolls if you want to know who voted, which is good information, right? Except not in Eureka. You get the voter roll and you'll walk up to a house. It's clearly a rental. You walk up to the house. It's got 7 names of registered people in that house. You knock on the door because one of those 7 actually voted for somebody like you, right? You have some data there. And the person that answers the door is A, not registered, B, doesn't know what's going on, and C, doesn't know who those 7 people are that at one time lived there. That's the voter rolls in Eureka. The only way you actually win, and kudos to everybody that's won, right? Because they did the new model. The new model is you got to get a bunch of people, you got to hit it on Saturdays, and you've just got to pester people to vote. And they oftentimes will go vote for somebody that they know nothing about just because they've been pestered and nagged into doing it. And my side has a tough time nagging because we're busy. We're busy doing things like businesses and hard stuff. I still door knocked, but I didn't have a big team going out there nagging people to vote. If I were to do it again, I would do it that way. I would get a big team, be a little bit less on policy and more about just constant annoying knock on their door and get them to promise to vote and just really drive that home. But that's not the way. I'm disgusted with the system because that's not the way it should be. The way it should be is the debates should matter. There should be ideas discussed. There should be different policies put up for debate, and the people should decide what they want. Not a ward system where nobody knows what ward they're in. It's incredibly gerrymandered, and that's just my point of view on it.
What year did you run for the city council?
I ran in 2018.
18. And for what ward?
Ward 1. Yeah, Ward 1. The behind the scenes on that was I probably should have moved over to Ward 5 and lived there a while, but I moved to Ward 1. I was right on the border. I lived on Oregon Street shortly before, I decided that I might run. So I keep bumping this. But I should have tried 5. That would have been better. But the problem with Ward 5 was that's where the needle people were, Hatcher, the people that were hiring the heroin addicts to go hand out, not the heroin dealers to hand out the free needles, that whole thing. That was in Ward 5. And you better believe they were signing people up to vote. So I didn't want to deal with that. I should have taken that head on. I figured that if I ran in the ward where my business was, I'd have better odds. And maybe that helped a little bit. But ultimately, the reason I lost was the other side had way more volunteers, and they pounded those doors on Saturdays, and they did the work. Me, I covered the neighborhood 2.5 times. A lot of people were not home, but I did walk it. I just went with small team, big message. I should have done little message, big team. That's the lesson learned. If you want to run currently, the lesson is big team, small message. Don't get a big old message because the attention spans are short right now. Social media, this is a huge problem. It's part of why that we sell the way that we do. It's a whole different set of selling skills than old school because the attention spans are so short. Everyone's on the TikTok and the social media. If you don't capture their attention in 4 seconds, you're losing the deal. Well, it's the same with politics.
People say that, and I say that too.
Yeah.
But I also listen to 3-4 hour podcasts.
Mm-hmm. So you're interested.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people that do that.
Yeah. Maybe that will help. Maybe what I'm noticing will get curbed by long form podcasts. That would be nice. I would love for the attention spans to widen. So you might be right about that. When I first noticed the shortened attention spans and changed my sales game for it, it was like 10 years ago. So
maybe the pendulum swinging back.
Man, that would be nice. That would be really nice. That's a great point. Never thought of that. Because the old Lincoln Douglas debates, when Steve Douglas went up against Abe Lincoln and they did their debates, what people don't realize about that is you can read the debates. They were incredible. They were going for hours. There was standing room only. Farmers, ranchers, everybody was filling up the room and was paying attention, listening to every single word. You see, we have a heritage of long form. We have a heritage of going really deep into issues. We lost our depth, oddly enough, when we got off the gold standard. That's when everything started to get shortened, if you will, and we started being told what to think and what to believe. That's a really interesting point I just came up with.
You know what my favorite Lincoln story is?
What's that?
Is that he was a shit talker. He was a troll.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He was in that debate.
And then there was
high whiny voice too, right?
He was writing some letters talking shit about some dude or posting them in a newspaper or something, and then the guy challenged him to a duel, and it really messed him up. And I believe he went to the duel, but for whatever reason it fell apart, and then he changed his whole attitude and became Honest Abe.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Crazy story.
People
talking shit.
Yeah. People change. They do change. I'm totally different now, I think, than I was 20 years ago because you grow with the issues. Hopefully you do. There's too many people that at some point, I think it happens in the 30s for a lot of people, but maybe it's later. I think a lot of people decide I'm going to stop learning. I'm going to stop my personal growth. I'm going to stop paying attention because it makes me uncomfortable and I like having things a set way. And I think we all can fall into that, but you can really tell, especially when the person makes that decision in their 30s and then you meet them in their 70s and their 80s, you can tell who kept learning and who decided to stop. And that's what's so great about what I do for a living is I'm talking to the people that are still learning. I love that. It's way better energy than the other way around.
Well, that's how you should live your life.
It is how you should.
Constantly be trying to learn.
Absolutely right.
I think there's a marked difference in who I am prior to the podcast and post the podcast.
Is there?
Absolutely. You can't sit in here and talk to an eclectic group of people for hours at a time and not change in any way.
I would hope so, because everyone that's kind of what we're talking about with human intelligence being a moving target. You can learn something from everybody, from anybody. A hobo off the street can teach you something because he might have been in a particular spot once that's unique. I've got so many stories like that, but then also little stories for myself. I was in between jobs in DC and I was paired up with this guy from South Africa. He had been in this country probably not more than 6 months. And this was way door to door, but business to business. I'm going in, I'm knocking on the business's door, trying to sell them office supplies. We were in Arlington, Virginia, where all the defense contractors are, right? We were there, and this is what he would do. He would somehow get into the building, and his plan was, I'm not going to try to imitate his accent, but he would say basically, get to the top floor, work every floor down. At like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, places like that. And at the time, I really needed the money. I was in a tough spot. I'm like, I don't know about this, but I followed along with them. And one of the buildings we went into, we did it. We got to the top, and then we ended up doing 1 or 2 floors. And then a woman stopped us and said, "Hey, you can't even be in here." And she said, "There's guys with guns on the 2nd floor. If you're caught, it's jail." So, we freaked out. We jumped in the elevator and we got out of there. But what's crazy is when that happened, I've never told anybody this, at least not on camera, but this is 20 years, statute of limitations, right? What's crazy is one of those top floors, I'm not going to say the company, it doesn't matter. I go in there and it was like rows and rows and rows of cubicles and just, I don't know what they were doing in there. I don't know what was so secretive, but real life story, I've got so many weird things like that, just bouncing around and trying to pay attention. Because I kept thinking about that question you had, when did you start to see that so much of the deep state is running things? It was a bunch of little things like that where I started to very slowly get a clue. I'm never the smartest person in the room. I so rarely get it first. Sometimes I feel like I'm last. But on this one, I'm ahead of most people just because I keep my eyes open and I self-reflect a little bit. I don't spend much time looking at the past. That's why I keep bringing things up, because it just comes to me. I am like 90% focused on the future because I got so much going on. But this has been kind of interesting, just getting some stuff out.
How long were you in D.C.?
I was in D.C. I went to college at Hillsdale, Michigan, and then I graduated in 2005. And then I went right to politics. I went to work for Leadership Institute in the field and in the office. And then I jumped around several places. But ultimately, I did a lot, but I was only there in the Capitol for 2 years. 2 years tops. It seems like a lot longer, but I ultimately worked a perfect job that if I were in a different frame of mind and wanted something different for my life, I should have kept it. But it was time to come home. I ended my career, my political career, I ended with Donald Devine, who runs the American Conservative Union Foundation. He's an incredible individual, and I bring him up because he was the guy that Reagan put in charge of firing personnel. And he wanted the government, he wanted to do what Trump wants to do with Musk and Vivek, Reagan wanted to do with my old boss, Donald Devine. He said something like, "Donald, I want you to cut a bunch of jobs and make the rest work harder." You can look up the quote, it's something like that. And that's what Don did. Donald was called Reagan's swift, terrible sword. See, we've done this before. We've done purges of useless staff. We've done it before. And I hope that Trump's team studies this, because what Donald Devine did was miraculous. Early 80s, from 80 to 84. I believe you have to ask him, but I believe that they didn't renew his contract in 84 because he was so effective. And by that point, the deep state was really, really taken over. I mean, you can't have George H.W. Bush for a VP and have no deep state tentacles in what you're doing. But to Don's credit, he cut a lot of staff in the early 80s. And that's part of why we were so successful as a country in the 80s.
Do you take
it can
that
work, is my point.
Do you take that as a warning that even though it might work, it might not be solid? That you could have Reagan do that, 4 years of greatness, and then suddenly everything reverts back to where it was?
Yeah, if you don't cut it deep enough, it's like a weed. If you want to get the dandelion out of your garden, you don't just cut the heads off. You've got to pull it by the massive roots. And it's the same thing with government. Don did great work. You can read about it. There's been studies on the incredible work that he did. It wasn't enough. It was not enough. And we got to get it right this time. And the only way to do that is to strike at the root. And the root is the crony capitalist structure. The root is the nefarious deal Amazon has with the Postal Service. The root is so many different things. There are so many different people in the public trough that don't belong in there. And yeah, of course, I'm a libertarian-leaning person. I'm a conservative person. Yeah, I'm all these labels. Okay, great. But at the end of the day, we should all want limited government that works efficiently for us. That's what we should want. So
there are a lot of people that don't want limited government.
I know, and that makes me really sad because we could have a really great country. We are so far behind. We've turned over our high-end telecommunication chip our computer chip technology, we gave it to Taiwan. We've given away so much of our middle American manufacturing to the rest of the world. And China's in a bad spot right now. The music industry is moving out of China in many respects. We're starting to see India, either Fender or Yamaha's, I think, building a factory there. We're seeing Vietnam, Indonesia, Korea, Japan pick up the slack from China. People are moving out of there because they are so unfair, their competition practices and some of the horrible things that they do over there. So America's, the opportunity is right now, because if China gets their act together somehow and fixes their serious problems, their problems are so much bigger than ours over there. In fact, I don't think they're going to fix their problems. I think we're kind of relatively safe in that respect. This is our window, though, because if BRICS ever gets together and makes another currency, that's a death knell to us. My point is, there are certain things in our future that if we don't fix it now, are going to sink us completely, that we're not going to recover from. And I'm not a doom and gloomer, I'm an optimist, but I just got to highlight the fact that we got 4 years. I keep coming back to that. I think the audience gets it.
I'm just worried about these external factors that we have at play now, with the war in Ukraine, with the war in Israel and Palestine, with the potential war, the drums beating for Iran.
Yeah. And what's crazy is you can find it if you dig deep enough. There's a lot of stuff that I've written, stuff about me, if you really dig. I wrote an article that's really hard to find in 2007 called "It's Time for War with Iran."
You did?
I did, yeah. I did. I wrote that.
Whoa.
Yes, I did. I wrote it. You have to really dig. It was published in the Persian Times. They published it. And it was a good effort. It was a 3 or 4 piece, and it had to do with how we need to team up with the student revolution. It wasn't badly, it wasn't a bad argument, but it was somebody that was heavily programmed by his media telling him the way the world was. And I encourage you to find it if you can.
I'll have to read it.
I don't have a copy. I have it somewhere. But please check it out and see where I was right and where I was wrong. I'm absolutely still right about the student revolution part, about that. We've lost that opportunity several times. There's a great book by James Clavell called Whirlwind. He was the one that wrote Shogun, Taipan, which were his 2 big books. But there's a book he wrote kind of similarly called Whirlwind, and it has to do with, it's a novel. It's not necessarily real, but it's real enough because he covers what happened when the Shah left Iran and the fall and what that looked like. And it imagines what that world was like. Iran is an incredibly complex country, but they're savable even now. They have a history of smart businessmen. They have a history of strong families. War is not the answer over there, but teaming up with the opposition and forcing out the mullahs is the answer. That I still believe that part. But the other stuff I said in that article is garbage, and I don't support that anymore.
Oh man, I'll have to try to find that.
It's somewhere out there.
To read.
Yeah. Back then it was different. There was no social media. Like Facebook came out in 2005. I was on Facebook 10 months after it came out, right? It was virtually nothing. It was just pictures and you can make groups. That's all you could do. Actually, there's something interesting I can get into with that. Back then, if you were just educated enough, you could get published in papers around the world. It wasn't that hard.
Through Facebook?
Not through Facebook.
Oh, this is just external.
But back then, like today, if you try to get something published in like the Persian Times, if they're even still around, it's not going to happen because of social media. Social media, they're going to look at your background. They're going to be like, well, why is he writing us? He's a crackpot. He doesn't belong here. Well, back then you could get away with it because journalists are one of the laziest groups of people in the industry. There's nobody lazier than journalists. Okay. So all you had to do back then, it was hilarious. You just write well, write a good argument, do it right, do the work. Got to have integrity. You got to do the work. And then you just send it in and see what happens. And that was one of those weird things that you could get away with in the mid-2000s. Another thing you could get away with is the way that when I was a field rep for the Institute, Leadership Institute, Facebook was not pay to play. It was that back then the CIA started Facebook, right? You know that. Everyone knows that.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Look into that. That's an incredible rabbit hole.
The CIA started Facebook.
Yeah, I believe that. I think it was HARPA or DARPA, one of those things. And sure enough, I really do believe that. Back then, everyone was putting their information on there. They were putting what limited pictures they could put, because you couldn't just put unlimited pictures, right? But you would say your religion, you would say how politically conservative or liberal you were, and it was all public. And so when I was a field rep for the Institute, I was in charge of different states. And what I would do, at first I was in charge of Idaho, Washington, Montana, Oregon, incredible amount of land, right? That was my region. And the method was Facebook. What you would do is you would spam a large group of people. And that group of people, you could go to Facebook back then. You can't do this now. You could go to it back then. You could say, I want to know who's going to Gonzaga University in Seattle and who says that they are very conservative or very liberal. And you could hit boom. And then all of a sudden you would get all the names. And then what you would do is you would curate a message to all of them and you'd say, hey, I'm going to be on your campus at this time. I want to meet with you to talk about starting a newspaper or a gun rights group or whatever it was, whatever we were doing at the time. And it worked. So what I would do is I'd send those messages out. I would get meetings and I would roll into town, do those meetings, get on the ground, talk to people and do whatever we were doing. And then I'd drive away to my next group. You can't do that today. Because now if you want that information, you got to pay for it. You pay a fortune for that. But this was just how technology provides opportunities in the moment. And that was a huge opportunity for a political organizer in the moment. And there were 25 or 30 field reps at the time for the Institute. I got second place. Just doing that primarily. Big tangent, but my point with that is pay attention to the technology you have at your fingertips in the decade you're in, because there are certain aspects of it that are gone the decade after. And that's just as true now as it was in 2005 or 6, whenever it was.
What makes you say that the CIA started Facebook?
There has...
I've never heard this before.
Oh, okay. CIA,
not arguing whether it's true or not, but I've just never heard that idea.
Let's take a step back from CIA and just say government program. There was a government program. It might have been connected to DARPA, something like that. But I believe, I don't know enough to go into this with you. I know it's a rabbit hole that's really interesting. So this is where if I make a definitive statement, I want to know I can back it up. I'm pretty sure that it was deep state.
Is it similar to the connection between the government and the founding of Google?
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay.
I haven't looked. That's the rabbit hole I haven't looked in. There's so many rabbit holes.
Oh, there's a ton. You could lose your mind.
How
Do you worry about that? I think about slipping off the cliff. That you start going down these rabbit holes, and some are true, but some are not true.
I solved that problem though.
You solved it
in my opening when I told you
by talking to people.
Yeah. You're grounded by people.
But some people are freaking crazy.
Well, yeah, you don't just...
I've talked to a few crazy people and you're like,
yeah, and I'm the worst of them. No, but 40% of where I get my information is people. That doesn't mean that 40% of information is good information. It's full of nonsense, right? It's not objective at all. I'm taking it and I'm taking the other things that I get from social media and the things that I've learned myself from reading or whatever, and I'm piecing it together. Just because somebody comes in and tells me, hey, I was a military contractor that turned down that job in Antarctica, I don't immediately just, become a groupie for him and be like, oh, tell me more. I'm going to believe everything. No, come on. I'm going to take the information and I'm going to see how it sequences with other things that I know to be true. And there's so many different things, so many rabbit holes I've started that I just put my hands up and say, no, I'm done with that. There's so many things like that. Not because I don't think there's something there, but because I can't prove it. And that's how I don't go crazy with it. Because I know people, and I'm sure you do too, who, when you look at them, they're all bug-eyed, they got bags under their eyes because all they're doing is consuming this stuff. Well, that's not healthy. That's not a healthy way to be. That's why I try to be open and honest that I've looked in this rabbit hole. I haven't looked into this one. I've done my due diligence here. I haven't done it there. And then when somebody challenges me, I'm like, okay, I'll consider that. And I really do consider it because I always want to be upfront about how the truth is a moving target. It's a moving target and it changes by the day what's going on. And because it's all about standing too. What is the standing of the person that's asking? The truth about what's going on in Ukraine is incredibly different for, say, an American transfer student who's at their second year at Ukraine University who's just trying to get an A+ in their dorm room right now. Their concept of what's going on over there, their feedback, what they're going to see is totally different than what I'm going to see through all my sources. That doesn't mean that they're wrong, but the information I get from them is going to be really different from somebody that used to work in the military that I might happen to know. So that's kind of what I mean by the truth being a moving target, especially with human testimony. You still have to collaborate it. Just because somebody tells you something crazy doesn't mean you just believe it. And I know people that'll believe too quickly, and you don't want to do that. So to answer your question, I check myself by reading and by trying to figure it out myself if I care to. There's so many things that I've put on the shelf that I just don't deal with because
you just don't have the time.
I don't have the time, yeah.
I feel the craziest talking to people who only consume mainstream media.
Yeah.
Regardless of the issue.
Yeah.
You just start to feel, if you start talking about NATO expansion and the biolabs and Burisma to someone that hasn't heard any of those,
it's not going to go well.
You feel insane.
You do. You feel
nuts. How do you not know anything about this? And they're like, that's not true. That's not true. Russia was a part of NATO. And you're like, what are we talking about here?
But here's what's crazy about that is the people that, in my experience, the people that are the most hardest headed on not wanting to believe the truth are the ones that are programmed. If you talk to somebody that looked into the biolabs, which I did, if you talk to somebody that looked into Burisma and read Profiles in Corruption, Peter Schweitzer's book on all the different Democrats that were running alongside Joe Biden, some of that's in there. You do the work. I'm way more, you can push back on me and I'll be like, okay, there might be something there. But you get somebody who's been listening to Peter Jennings for 20 years, you're not going to take the pushback. He's going to think it's an insult. He's going to think that you're insulting his intelligence.
They're too attached to the idea.
Yeah, they're very attached to the idea. They're attached to the programming. That's why if we can all agree that a detox, a media detox, especially a deep state media detox is a good idea, it would do wonders for people. And it would reduce anxiety. It would reduce hypertension, especially if they're older. If they've been consuming the news, if they've been consuming the news for 20 years, they have health issues, probably. Because think of all the anxiety that comes with that. If you actually believe that stuff, even now, if you actually believe Rachel Maddow and the Russia stuff, if you actually believe all this stuff, if you believe that Trump is a rapist, yes, okay, he went in a clothing stall and did what they said. Give me a break. People believe this, though, because they were told to believe it. They did zero work. It's crazy.
The Russian asset one would be the craziest one to believe.
It's right up there.
Because then the incoming president and the previous sitting president is owned by Russia. That would blow your mind. If you truly believe that and you thought we have now been co-opted by Russia.
Yeah, it's friggin' nuts. And how you do the work on that. Okay, how was Trump with Russia? Well, he wasn't very good to Russia. He hit them hard with sanctions. He made things miserable for them. Arguably, he might have pushed them too far. You can make that argument.
Well, just look at the Steele dossier. Start there.
Total disaster.
Just start there. Just look at that.
That was the one that said Trump peed the bed, right? Was that the Steele dossier? Yeah.
But was it pee the bed or had people pee on him?
Yeah. It's the same.
I thought it was a pee sex tape.
Who believes that? Nobody believes that. Nobody that's not programmed believes that.
I know people that still believe Russiagate was real.
Do you really?
And he just got away with it. Oh, yeah.
How much work have they done on it?
None. But they also believe, they believed in masking and they believe in social distancing and I don't know anybody that's still getting booster shots.
I do, unfortunately.
Sure. Do you really?
Yeah, I do. Let's talk about that a little bit. Can you talk about that without
COVID?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I guess you can talk about it.
I'm not a stranger to having videos pulled. I'm not afraid of that.
Well, I'm very honest. I'm not a vulnerable guy, but I'm an honest guy. And here's what I'll prove it to you. Going with this 40% human intelligence, 40% what I read, and 20% social media as being how I get my knowledge. I keep coming back to that because I got the jab.
Did you really?
I did. Why?
Just the first one?
Well, I'll get to that. I'll answer your question. I got the jab. I wasn't going to, but I had intel come in from my 40%, from a source that I still to this day trust. He's right. They're right about a lot of things. I got this special intel. And
I like how you phrase that, special intel.
It was.
It's a debrief.
It was. Yeah, it was actually, because he gifted this intelligence to me because we're really close like that. And whether it's right or wrong, I acted on it, and I got the J&J before they mixed it with the mRNA. Thankfully, I didn't die suddenly. Thankfully, my family's safe. Most of my family went and did it too. The same one I did, the early J&J. Now, the J&J, after they dumped what I ended up taking, they dumped the 1.5 million doses, and then they made a new batch with our mRNA, the poison, right? Then they made it dangerous. But no, I did actually get the jab because I relied on my human intelligence.
What was the intelligence that made you change your mind?
The elite are taking it.
The fact that Trump got it.
Yeah. The elite, that's the only one they'll take. Not just that the elite are getting it, but the elite are taking that one because it actually might be a cure for cancer, might actually do something along that line. I don't know if cure for cancer is quite right, but it might actually cure other ailments. So it's actually good medicine. That's what I was told. Is it true or not? I don't know. I'm still alive. That's all I care about. The Died Suddenly documentary is heartbreaking. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I haven't seen it. The Died Suddenly documentary is not political. It's not very well made. It's kind of silly. I wish they had teamed up with somebody with some talent. But what they did, the study was, they went to funeral directors across America. Nonpartisan. These are funeral directors. These are morticians. These are people that are actually exhuming the bodies and prepping them for the coffins. The Died Suddenly documentary, incredibly controversial. And what happened was these morticians were pulling out protein out of the veins. Big, calcified, white, vein-blocking proteins that had never existed there before. Okay? The Died Suddenly documentary opened my eyes up big time to the mRNA threat, the things that like Peter McCullough and those guys, Rob Malone, those guys talk about. So no, I did get it because I acted on my human intelligence. And that's the thing is human intelligence isn't always right. It's not always right. And so you got to do your homework. And in that situation, I did the wrong thing. I definitely regret it. Shouldn't have done that.
I never got it.
And should not have talked to family members about doing it. I regret that too. So
because they convinced you to do it.
I convinced them to do it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I had people try to convince me to do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, people really tried and I did do it. I just regret the hell out of that one. That was a mistake.
Well, if you had to get one, the J&J one was probably the one to get.
The early one, not the later one. Look into the 1.5 million things that they dumped.
Did you get the one that they pulled because it was causing health problems?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. The 1.5 million they pulled because it only caused 6 problems, 6 artery blockages. They always say the opposite of what they're doing. The one that caused the problems was the mRNA. It was the other ones, if you believe that this is a problem, right? Everyone's got really strong beliefs on this. I happen to believe that the mRNA is the real culprit and that's really bad medicine because you don't know what it's going to do. You don't know how it's going to manipulate your
where it's going to stay, if it's going to cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah, so no, accountability is important, and I just wanted to get that out there because, my point with that whole thing is just to say that you are responsible for how you organize the information you get. Don't worship anybody, right? Don't make a bond with that person on TV. Don't make a bond with this Walter Cronkite because that's not what that is anymore. You're never going to get it straight from any one source. You have to collaborate it yourself. That's my only point with that. It's the best example I can think of.
And the best example of no accountability.
Yeah.
There's been no fallout.
No fallout. And I don't know what's going to end up happening with that. But that's just one of the many things we have to fix in 4 years.
I'm interested to see what RFK does.
Yeah, should be good. Thing with him is he's, Trump's on the record now. He's going to release the JFK files. He's going to release the MLK files.
But he said the JFK files before. He said that going in, I believe, to 2016.
He did.
Or maybe while he was president.
That's right. Absolutely right. But the follow-up on that is the latest question, if I remember right, was, will you release all of the files? And he said that he would. Pompeo, as I'm sure you know, talked him out of it. And of course that was a mistake. There's no political technology. There's no spycraft technology from that far back that's going to hurt anything if it comes out. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. And so Trump has made those promises. He has to release these files or else he's breaking his promise. And he doesn't break promises. He keeps his promises. He's got a great record of doing that. I don't know one promise he's broken. Not one that I can think of anyway.
Be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Anthony, thanks for doing this, man.
All right.
Thanks for coming
We're all
on.
done. Very good.
Yeah, unfortunately,
That's okay.
It's 3. I've got another guy coming in here to record a podcast.
Good deal.
So I got to set up his set.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Do you want to plug anything where people could find the store? Any of your
Sure.
Stuff?
Yeah, the store, we have a lot of different portals. We're on reverb.com. We are mtsmusic.com is the website. It's a Google search. You'll find us. AnthonyMantova.com is still up. I don't know if I'm going to keep it up, but I also have a Substack where I put the better articles on there. And of course, I'm on the socials. I'm easy to find. I'm the easiest guy to find in Humboldt. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, man.